Replicants are like any other machine. They're either a benefit or a hazard. If they're a benefit, it's not my problem.
Hello and welcome back to more Films Under Constant Critique, where we take a look at films, some good, some bad, and some downright awful. I'm Bongo Baikov, joined by our host Maverick, Dren, Zaria. This week we're taking a look at the film Blade Runner, the final cut.
Yes. I guess you could have chosen any of the first, but yeah. Well, actually, that's actually not the version I watched, technically, but
Oh, okay.
I saw that I've seen 3 of the different cuts of it. Because I watched the final cut like a couple of years ago. Like a year and a half ago, and I went, okay, anyway, I'll get into that later, but okay. But yeah, this podcast is kind of becoming sci-fi films under constant critique, when you think about it.
Yeah.
And another thing, you knew I was going to bring you up. You knew I was going to bring this up. And another thing, so we're going to have to put an asterisk on the AVPR episode. Because during that podcast, I asked if you'd seen Blade Runner, and you said you had.
And it was a lie.
And I did not find out that it was until 3 years later, and we recorded, I think it was the Evil Dead podcast. I didn't...
I think so.
I left it out of the final edit, so I don't know, like... Because it was so painful to listen to, I couldn't, like, I didn't put it in the deleted scenes either. Hell, maybe I'll put it in this podcast just because that'd be funny. I'm still confused by that, though. Like, because I literally asked you in the AVPR episode if you'd seen Blade Runner. You said you had.
I think what it was is I sat there, I heard the question, I immediately answered yes, realized I hadn't, and just decided that I had to roll with it.
I thought maybe you'd misheard me or something. Because I do mumble a lot sometimes, so I don't know. But yeah, I cannot remember which podcast it was. I'm gonna have to go look, but yeah, so that was really awkward. Retro. Did you at least like the movie, for fuck's sake?
Oh, well, we're not at the part where we talk about our thoughts yet.
Okay, I'm worried now. It was released on June 25th, 1982. It cost $30 million and only made $41.6 million.
That seems pretty low.
So yeah, this is another cult film we're doing on the podcast. And part of why I've heard it was box office bomb is it was marketed as an action movie.
And it definitely isn't an action movie.
And people would assume that because Harrison Ford's in it. This was after Star Wars. This is after Indiana Jones. The year after Raiders of the Lost Ark is when this came out.
Oh, yeah.
It was directed by Ridley Scott. And he is no stranger to our podcast.
Yep. We've had him on Alien, we've had him on Prometheus, we've had him on Covenant.
And now we've have him again.
On another sci-fi movie.
Yes. I think that's all of his sci-fi movies.
Really?
Because he is a little more eclectic than I would think. Because like most of the other movies I'm thinking of like, is he Gladiator? Oh, The Martian. No, never mind. There was.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. Yeah.
Although The Martian's a pretty soft sci-fi, I would say.
You can survive from potatoes on Mars, apparently.
Growing in your own shit.
But yeah, Ridley Scott, I generally like his stuff, but he's a bit frustrating sometimes because he's made some great movies like Alien, this, The Martian, Gladiator.
And then he also makes movies like Prometheus and Covenant.
And The Counselor and House of Gucci.
I forgot he did House of Gucci.
That was not a good movie, man. It did have a David Bowie song in it, though, so it...
Hey, that's all you need.
And the cast, and again, there's a few people here who are no strangers to our podcast, because the movie stars Harrison Ford.
Yep.
Do we have to explain who Harrison Ford is again? I mean...
I don't think so. Does this movie, or will the next one tie him for...
The next one will do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, he's in, like, a ton of Star Wars movies. He played Indiana Jones, you know.
Yeah.
If we do Dial of Destiny, he'll be, like, the actor who's been on...
The podcast the most.
Yeah, exactly.
Or if we do The Fugitive.
Or The Fugitive, yeah. You switched the samples. Yeah.
I didn't kill my wife.
I don't care.
I don't care.
Yeah, Rucker Hauer, which he has been on our podcast before because he's in Batman Begins.
I'm trying to remember.
Minor supporting role. He's one of the bad guys. He works at Wayne Enterprises. I think he's trying to take over the business, if I remember right.
Okay.
But the reason why I drew so much attention to that while we were doing the Batman Begins podcast is because he's in Blade Runner. That's why I was drawing so much attention to that. And if you want him on the podcast again, we could do Sin City at some point, because he's in the first Sin City. Sean Young. This is one of her early film roles.
Yeah, it looks like it's only her third movie.
She was in Stripes before this, I know that.
Okay.
And she's in Ace Ventura, Pet Detective.
Oh.
That's mainly, I'll be honest, that's mainly what I remember her from, is Ace Ventura.
You don't remember her from a Dr. and Jekyll and Miss Hyde?
I don't think I've seen that.
Hold on, what is this?
I think I've heard of that, but I haven't seen it. And what's funny about Sean Young, though, is she's not only in the 80s version of Dune,
yeah,
she's also in the Asylum ripoff of Dune.
Are you serious?
Called Planet Dune.
Oh, no.
They're like, hey, let's get a Dune actor to be in our Dune ripoff. Edward James Olmos. Which usually, when I think of him, I think of his character from Miami Vice, because he was on that show. M. Emmett Walsh, which he's another actor with a ridiculously huge filmography, so I'm not going to go into that. You've probably seen him in a few things, at least.
I've seen him in Blade Runner.
Yeah, you've seen him in Blade Runner. I think he's in Knives Out, if I remember right.
Oh.
He's in Chuck Norris movie, Missing in Action, which also has James Hong in it. Which, speaking of which, James Hong is in this movie.
Yep.
After being in Everything Everywhere All at Once, so he's another cast member who returns. Daryl Hannah's in this. I remember her from Splash or Roxanne, Wall Street. I take it you haven't seen any of these movies.
No.
Okay. Brian James, which he's in
a number of things, including Fifth Element.
One thing I find really funny, he's in, The Fifth Element. The other one I was going to mention is he's in the movie Time Runner.
Oh.
Typecasting much?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I think I've mentioned this movie before, if I remember right. Mark Hamill's in it.
Yes.
And it takes place in 2022.
You want to know what else Brian James is in?
What?
Superman 64.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, he is Parasite in Superman 64.
Oh my god, I did not know that. That's hilarious. Didn't know there were any actors in Superman 64.
I guess he provides the voice grunts.
Okay.
He was also in Hong Kong 97, the movie Hong Kong 97.
Oh, the movie? Okay.
Yeah.
We should do that on the podcast at some point,
just so we can talk about the Hong Kong 97 video game.
Yeah. And hey, we need to get Robert Patrick on the podcast at some point. Joe Turkel. which most people would recognize him as Lloyd the bartender from The Shining.
Oh.
And he's in 2 other Stanley Kubrick movies. He's in The Killing. He's in Paths of Glory. He also looks a lot like Lou Reed.
Yeah, a little.
The music score, it was done by the unfortunately deceased Vangelis. Rest in peace. He also did the music for Cosmos, The Carl Sagan Show, and Chariots of Fire.
Oh.
And that's basically the only thing people remember about that movie is the music.
Yeah.
You know, like, even people who haven't seen Chariots of Fire, they have heard that music.
Yeah, they know the song.
Any scene of people running has that song playing. I mean...
Mr. Bean ran to it at the Olympics.
Yes, he did. And when I used to have a Spotify account, actually, I used to listen to the score for Blade Runner a ton. Like, I love the score to this movie. And this movie was based on a book, actually.
Yes. The very wonderfully titled Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Yeah, it's by Philip K. Dick. I have read it. It's very different from the movie. The premise is about the same, you know, with Deckard. Like, the basic premise of Deckard, like, being a bounty hunter that kills androids. But the actual events play out very differently. The novel seemed to be more about how humans have become like robots, so it was more like there was more social commentary in it than in the movie. And the androids are not likable at all in the book.
Huh.
One thing that's interesting, the terms Blade Runner and replicants are not from the book.
Really?
And a lot of Dick's other works, they've been turned into films. Total Recall, Minority Report, Paycheck, A Scanner Darkly, those are just a few of them. Well, okay, it'd be more accurate to say that most of these took the basic premise and then kind of did their own thing. And Blade Runner was actually the first movie adaptation of a Philip K. Dick book.
Okay.
So yeah, initial thoughts now. I'll let you go first on this one.
So
your first time seeing it.
So this is technically my second attempt at watching the movie, I guess. The first time I watched it up until about the point where Rachel is being analyzed using the why can't I remember? The Voight-Kampff machine.
That's very early in the movie, actually.
Yeah, I think I got to that part. Something distracted me, and I kind of just forgot to come back to it. But this time, I did watch it all the way through. And I loved it.
Thank fucking God. Okay. I was about to say, I was going to be so depressed the rest of the night if you didn't like it.
I will say there were parts of the movie where it was a bit slow. Like, I think there probably was some things that they could have cut down or cut out. But overall, it's very strong. I love the world that this movie takes place in. Like, watching this, I want to see more things that take place in this dystopia.
Which you will, because there's a sequel, and then we also have Soldier to watch. Or you could watch the Super Mario Brothers movie. Which we will do a podcast on that at some point this year. Yes.
And there's also a video game, which I might talk a little bit about later.
Okay, that might be interesting. And obviously I will talk about the alternate cuts of it, because you watched the final cut.
Yes, since that's the one available on Hulu.
And the one I have the DVD that has like 4 different cuts of it. And I watched the director's cut, which is from 1992, and there are a few differences. I love this movie. Like, if it isn't obvious, it's one of my favorite, not just sci-fi movies, but I would say just in general. I would say this is a favorite of mine. I think it's great. It's definitely very, like, slow, but it keeps you engaged, I think. Because it has a very interesting, moody atmosphere. It has tons of great themes, you know, of like dehumanization, death, loneliness, things I relate to, so definitely my type of movie. I'm a depressing person, I know.
The whole thing's got a great atmosphere to it.
It's a movie that definitely benefits from repeat viewings, like to get a sense of the plot and the themes, because the first time I saw it, I will admit I was a bit confused by some of it. And what I like about this movie is it feels like a film noir in a sci-fi setting.
Yes.
Deckard is basically this hard-boiled detective that lives in this futuristic city.
And his whole purpose is to hunt down these androids, which are known as replicants, which look like and act exactly like humans.
And it's interesting seeing Harrison Ford playing more of an anti-hero. Like, he's kind of the bad guy of the movie, if you look at it from the point of view of the replicants. Because at first, we kind of see the movie as being about how technology can run amok, before we realize that it's also about whether machines have rights as well, which has been explored in other stuff, like The Next Generation. With
I was just about to mention that with Data, the whole...
Data, yeah.
Yeah.
And then this isn't the first time Ridley Scott has had androids in his movies, because he did Alien, and that was an android.
Although the android in that movie was a little less nuanced.
Yes,
and he instead tried to shove a newspaper down Ellen Ripley's throat.
It wasn't a newspaper, it was like a porno magazine. And also, if we're judging this movie purely on visuals,
it's a beautiful movie.
Like, if you judge it just on visuals, it might be the best movie ever made. Like, the visuals in this movie are incredible, and this movie came out 40 years ago.
Yeah.
There's stuff made after it that doesn't look as good. And, like, obviously, like, every futuristic movie made since then has in some way tried to steal the look of Blade Runner, whether it's the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Especially the Mario Brothers movie, because it's the same set designer.
Akira, Fifth Element, obviously. They basically just all stole their designs from Blade Runner, just to name. And honestly, I get why. I mean, I can't think of a sci-fi movie that, like, at least a dystopian movie that has a better looking world than this.
Yeah.
I will say, though, if you're expecting one thing that some people, when they watch this, for some reason they think it's going to be an action movie.
It's definitely not. There are a few actiony scenes towards the end.
Yeah.
But on the whole, it's much more of a noir investigating, talking kind of movie.
It's also a very dour movie.
Yes. It is very depressing.
When I watched it in the morning too. Like,
a great way to start the day.
I was like watching it again, and it made me realize just how depressing this movie is. The more times I watch it and think about it, I appreciate it more. Like, it's smart without being up its own ass.
Yes, which is something that apparently Ridley Scott forgot how to do.
Yeah, he didn't have the same script writers. That was probably why. That was one thing I was thinking about, actually, is Prometheus and Covenant seem more like they were trying to be Blade Runner than Alien. At least with, like, the themes and stuff.
Yeah.
You know? Because, like, the main villain of those is basically an android.
Yeah, he's an android trying to become human. Or, I guess, trying to become a god, technically, but...
Okay, the people that like... I mean, and if you like Prometheus, fine. But Roy Batty is so much more interesting than David. Was...
Yes.
Yeah, he's a way more interesting character. And he was only in one movie.
And he really doesn't show up until, like, halfway through.
Exactly, yeah. But you never forget him. And yeah, again, like, we just don't get movies like this anymore. Partly because even back then, you didn't get movies like this.
It really... So, in some ways, it does feel unique, and in other ways, it doesn't. Because, like we mentioned, the style of it has been copied endlessly. but it's actually pulled off just so incredibly well.
The thing is, they ripped off the aesthetic of it a lot, but they were never able to rip off the feel of it.
Exactly.
Or the atmosphere. And I'm definitely, it bombed when it came up. I'm definitely glad it's appreciated now. It deserves it, If I do have any problems with the movie, though, they tend to come from the different cuts there are, but I'll get to that. This movie takes place in the year 2019.
In the far-off future.
That's really funny, actually. And the book took place in 1992, I should point out.
Oh, wow.
Although apparently there's some revised versions that have it so it's set in 2021. Keep moving the goalposts, why don't you? And the basic plot, I guess we did kind of talk about this, but the basic plot is that it gives it to you in the opening crawl, too.
Yes.
That in the future, there's these androids called replicants, which were created by the Tyrell Corporation, basically just to be used as slaves. Although they don't really specify what type of slaves. I guess that's kind of just up for interpretation.
I am gonna say, just based off of just a few lines here and there, it sounds like there are some sort of physical labor, like shipping industry, maybe.
I do remember them
like
mentioning
mining.
like military.
Yeah.
Also, but yeah. And basically, the replicants are supposed to be these superior robots that look and act a lot like humans, but they only have a 4-year lifespan.
Yeah.
But then there was a mutiny, and now replicants are illegal, so they have these bounty hunters called Blade Runners. Title drop. And they were hired to retire them. Which is basically just a polite way of saying execute. They're hired to kill the replicants. And basically the main thrust of the plot is our main character, Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, is a former Blade Runner that's pulled out of retirement to look for some escaped replicants, led by Roy Batty, Rucker Hauer.
Yep.
And then his job gets complicated a bit when he falls in love with a replicant named Rachel, and is told by his superiors that he has to kill her. So that's the basic plot of it. Now let's just get into... Let's just start with just the design of the movie. How about... Like, the one positive right off the bat, the set design is just...
It's perfect.
It's
basically
incredible. Like, just the overall look of them. I mean, right from the opening, it sucks you right in. There's this cool futuristic landscape with lots of fire. There's these futuristic pyramids, flying cars.
And it's able to do something that not a lot of sci-fi is able to do, where it is this futuristic high-tech world, but it looks like it's still lived in.
Yes.
It's not like everything's made out of chrome and everyone like floats around and talks like an elf or whatever. It feels like a realistic interpretation of a super advanced futuristic world.
I mean, it basically is what LA looks like right now. But
Really, we're just gonna copy the Detroit jokes from RoboCop.
I'm not kidding, though. I remember this was like a year or two ago. I was seeing pictures of what LA looks like right now.
Oh yeah, when with all of the fires.
My first thought was it looks like Blade Runner. But what I like about the design also is you have all these huge futuristic buildings and stuff, but then and they look really nice. And then down below you got like all these dirty streets and like lots of rain.
There's steam everywhere.
It's like really crowded. All the futuristic shiny stuff is up above, but then down below it's like super dirty and just disgusting.
Yeah.
I love the contrast right there. It makes it feel like a real
city.
Yeah, like LA. I also like how there's like Atari. An Atari symbol in the background at one point.
That's right, there is.
Oh, that's like the one thing when I watch the movie and I'm like, oh yeah, this made in the 80s. Because everything else, like it generally looks like, yeah, this could be the future. But yeah, Atari, you don't generally see Atari much now. I wish more movies looked like this, you know? I mean, like there were a lot of shots of the city that kind of reminded me of like Metropolis. Like, I would not be surprised if they took inspiration from that movie. There's all these big Coke billboards too. It just looks like LA. It looks like an actual. It's missing the Randy Newman song "I Love LA" though. But the movie came out before that song though, and also what helps with the atmosphere, the music.
Yes, the music is just fantastic the whole way through.
Can you see why I listen to this score so much on Spotify? Hell, I've been listening to it in the days before we were going to record it. I was listening to it right before we were going to record. That's how much I like the score. I love the score to this because the whole overall feel of the movie is it's really futuristic and like high tech, but it's also really melancholy, and the score fits that perfectly. It's this very moody
this
electronic score, and it sounds great too, like on a TV. You know?
And this movie includes one of my favorite things that I love from older sci-fi, where they have like this super futuristic technology, but it still looks old because it's kind of based off of what they have.
Yeah.
So, for example, the Voight-Kampff machine.
Yes.
Is this confusing contraption to look at because there's all these moving parts, there's all these screens, they have a camera looking at the subject's eye. And during the scenes, whenever the machine is used, it's also filmed in such a way where you can see like a lot of light reflecting out of the subject's eye.
Yeah.
Which is just very interesting to see. And in a lot of cases, it does make them look a lot more robotic when you see it like that.
They use it to test whether somebody is a replicant or not. It's kind of a Turing test.
Yes.
It's like a literal Turing test. And yeah, the device, you can like see through it and there's an eye. Yeah, that looks really cool. And some of the questions that they ask them are kind of weird.
Yeah, you're in a desert. You see a turtle. It's lying on its back. You don't help it up.
And what is a tortoise? He asks.
Oh yeah, it's a tortoise. What's a tortoise? It's like a turtle.
You know what a turtle is? Same thing. And then like there's that one part he asks Rachel.
You're reading a magazine, you come across a full-page nude photo of a girl.
Is this testing whether I'm a replicant or a lesbian, Mr. Deckard?
But I think we should just go through, like, talk about some of the different characters, starting with Deckard. So, let's talk about Deckard. Yes.
So, for the most part, he's very much like a serious, sort of down-to-earth detective who is very clearly very good at his job.
Yeah, he's also just very filled with self-loathing, I was noticing on this.
Yes.
Because, yeah, he's good at his job, but he hates his job. Like, there's a reason he retired, you know?
And he can pretty easily catch whenever there is a replicant going around, it feels. Because he's usually able to see somebody kind of puzzle it out, and then he can do the test to confirm, but he's right, basically, every time.
And also, I'd like the stuff with him doing, like, all the detective stuff, like, where he's looking around in that bathtub, he finds a scale, or the part where he enhances the picture and then finds a replicant in the back of it.
I will say, one of my... there was one scene that got me to laugh pretty good. So it's when he's investigating the woman at, like, the strip club.
I think I know what you're talking about, yeah.
And he walks in with this weird, like, high-pitched voice when he's trying to talk to her.
I know what scene you're talking about, yeah. Like, he's looking for Zora. She's one of the replicants. And she also has a pet snake.
Yeah, it's not a real snake.
It's an artificial snake, yeah.
Mm.
That's a weird job for a replicant, too. It's like a stripper. I mean, which we'll see more of that in the next movie, I should point out.
Well, that raises the question, is it more or less ethical to have a replicant stripper as opposed to a real stripper?
I don't know. Questions this movie is not going to answer. And yeah, there's Deckard's like, he's doing a weird voice. He's basically pretending to be an agent.
He's like, have you felt like you've ever been exploited in any way?
It was honestly, you know what, it was reminding me of Last Crusade when Harrison Ford's pretending to be a Scottish lord.
It basically is. And there's the one part where it kind of drops out, like he can't hold it the whole time.
And that scene was also weird, because like usually when I think about Blade Runner, I don't generally think of there being much funny in the movie.
Yeah, well, because that's the only part that I really remember being funny. Was Harrison Ford using this weird voice.
There's like moments, not like entire scenes, but there's like little moments here or there that are kind of funny. Like there's another part later in the movie when like there's like this one part where Deckard, he almost gets arrested.
Oh yeah,
it's towards the end. Then they have to check him to make sure he's clear, and he tries talking to Sebastian. He's the weird guy with all the mechanical toys.
Yeah,
the replicants are hanging out with. And he tries pretending to be this old friend of him named Eddie, and they don't let him through. He says that's no way to treat a friend or something like that. That was like one of the only moments in the movie where I was like, you know, where it felt like a Harrison Ford moment, like Han Solo, or like it made me think of Han Solo, basically.
Yeah,
you know, which that's something we should definitely point out. His character in this is very, very different from
like Han Solo or Indiana Jones.
Definitely different from Indiana Jones, that's for sure. Because he's sort of like Han Solo in that he's a bit of a scumbag. Because honestly, he's kind of an asshole in the movie. Like,
yes.
Like, at least at first. Like, his early interactions with Rachel, he's not taking her emotions into account.
No. Because basically once he finds out that she's a replicant, he straight up tells her, you're a replicant. She tries to argue back with memories, and he's like, no, they just put those in you. They're not your memories.
He tells her memories that only she would know, and then he gives her the fakest apology ever. He like says sorry, but in a way that it doesn't sound like he means it. And I find his arc in this movie interesting, because basically his arc in the movie is that he hates himself and his job. And then gradually over the movie, he realizes he needs to stop killing replicants and appreciate his life.
Yes.
At least that's how I took it anyway. Again, it gets a little bit more complicated if you add in the question of whether he is or isn't a replicant. Do we want... Should we get into that later, or...
I mean, while we're talking about Deckard, we might as well mention that now.
Because that's something that's been a point of debate for years about this movie, is whether his character is a replicant or not. And there are little hints of it throughout.
And so that actually is something, because I haven't watched 2049 yet. And so I don't want you to confirm or deny anything. But what I'm hoping is that they leave it slightly open to interpretation still, and that they don't just, like, begin the movie by calling him a replicant or something stupid like that.
They don't really give a definitive answer, at least from what I remember.
Okay.
And it's not helped by the fact Ridley Scott thinks that Deckard's a replicant. Harrison Ford doesn't. The screenwriter says he wrote Deckard as human. In the Philip K. Dick novel, it's pretty clear that Deckard is human, although some police officers do interrogate him, asking if he's a replicant. And then it turns out those police officers themselves are replicants.
That's pretty good, actually.
There's honestly some stuff from the book I kind of wish was in the movie because it'd be fun. And the sequel leaves it kind of open-ended, at least from what I remember. And personally, at least as my personal, I actually like it more if he isn't a replicant.
I think I agree with that.
I actually think his character arc is more interesting if he isn't, because then that last interaction with Roy, it becomes more powerful because it's a machine making him realize what it means to be human and appreciating his own life more.
Yeah.
And I just like the idea of a machine acting and seeming more human than a human. Kind of interesting.
And it definitely does help, because then it gives more weight, I think, to his decision to leave behind the Blade Runner life and just live out his own life and appreciate it more than if it turns out he's been a replicant for 3.5 years and he's going to die in 6 months.
Yeah. And also it makes sense that he's getting his ass kicked the whole time because the replicants are way more powerful than he is. Although, again, there are hints that he is a replicant in the movie. Like, at one point you see his eyes.
Yep.
And they look sort of like an android's eyes. The thing that's mentioned the most, obviously, is the unicorn dream.
Yes.
Because there's this scene where he's, like, playing the piano and he's having this daydream of, like, just seeing a unicorn running. And then at the end of the movie, he finds an origami unicorn that Gaff left for him.
Yep.
Which seems to hint that,
it could be that his memories were planted and that Gaff knew the whole time.
I will say this about the replicant theory, though. It does make the movie a lot bleaker.
Yes, it is very depressing.
Because then not only is he, like, gonna die soon, then it's also about a replicant that was programmed to kill other replicants. The other thing with the unicorn dream, though, is, like, do unicorns actually exist in the Blade Runner universe?
I think not. However, that would be a very interesting addition.
I think it's an interesting idea that they add in there, and I'm glad they don't have a definitive answer for it. Oh yeah, there's that one line that Gaff says where he's like, "You've done a man's job." Which that might be him, if he's a replicant, that might be him just being, like, sarcastic.
Yeah, he's just slandering him, like, you're like one of those humans.
But it's just, in either way, it's just interesting seeing Harrison Ford playing a more morally gray and complex character than he usually plays.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I actually would say this is one of my favorite performances from him.
It's definitely up there for me. I still think The Fugitive for me is probably my favorite. Yeah, I'd say The Fugitive is like my favorite, non-Indiana Jones scumbag role that he's had.
Non-Indiana Jones, yeah. Non-Indiana Jones and non-Star Wars.
Yeah.
I think this is my favorite performance of his outside of Star Wars and Indiana Jones, actually, yeah. Because I don't know, I kind of relate to his character a little bit just because of how depressed and lonely he is. So, it's the closest we've gotten on this podcast to a main character who's sort of like Travis Bickle. Taxi Driver. Although, it'd be the version of Taxi Driver where he realizes that killing people is wrong and decides to take Betsy somewhere else, essentially.
Takes her to somewhere that's not a porno theater.
Why would you do that on a second date? Or any date, really. I mean, Jesus Christ. Gaff. He's an interesting character.
Very interesting.
He doesn't really do a whole lot in the movie, but he's definitely memorable.
Yeah.
Which might be the costume. I was, like, thinking about it earlier, and I was, like, thinking, what does this costume remind me of? It kind of reminds me of Freddie Mercury's costume from the Queen music video for Kind of Magic.
Okay, hold on, I have to look it up. No.
He's, like, wearing this magician costume and this hat, and I was like...
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
Which I should have realized that earlier, because that's been like my profile picture on a lot of things for a while, is that picture of Freddie Mercury. He doesn't really say much.
No, he's really only there at like the beginning and the end for the most part.
And I guess he's basically, what he does, he just follows Deckard around. I guess to make sure he does the job right, and so he can leave him little gifts, little origami figures behind. Out of all the characters in the movie, he's probably the one that looks the most like one from a film noir.
Yeah. It definitely I would disagree. I think that Deckard looks more like a film noir character. Mostly because of the trench coat.
The trench coat, yeah, but Gaff also has a trench coat.
It's not as good as Deckard's.
True, yeah, that is true, actually. Deckard has a... That was another thing I realized, like... Because I don't really notice it while I'm watching the movie, but when I actually look up, like, pictures of Deckard, I, like, always notice, like, that's a very interesting, like, shirt design that he's wearing, and also the tie. He's, like, wearing a tie. That'd be a good Halloween costume, actually. And he gets one of my favorite lines in the movie at the...
Which one?
Towards the end.
It's too bad she won't live! But then again, who does?
A pretty minor character, but I like the guy that's selling Deckard the noodles at the beginning.
What I find funny is Deckard keeps going like 4, I want 4. And he just keeps holding up 2. But then later it's shown that he can speak English just fine, so he's just being an asshole.
And then Gaff shows up and he's like just like pestering Deckard, trying to get him to go back to his job. And then the noodle guy says,
He say you Blade Runner.
The way he says that makes me kind of laugh. It's, again, this is another movie. Even the minor characters end up being kind of memorable, just because they're given these little weird eccentricities about the personality. Like Bryant, he's not in the movie much, but I always enjoy seeing M. Emmett Walsh in a movie, you know?
Yeah.
He's always a good presence, and here he's just playing an asshole police chief that hates replicants, and he calls them skin jobs.
James Hong's a pretty minor character, but he's fun. He's like growing fake eyeballs for replicants.
Yeah, he's in I was like watching that, just thinking like, what does this set remind me of? It reminds me of Mr. Freeze's ice cream factory from Batman.
It kind of does, because the whole thing is just frozen over. He's in a winter coat inside his lab. He's got all these like pipes and tubes hooked up to him.
Yeah, he's just making eyeballs. His character's name is Hannibal Chew, which is a pretty good character name. And during that scene, the one thing that's gross is like Leon, one of the replicants, keeps picking up like eyeballs and putting them on his back.
putting him on his shoulder. Like, what is he doing?
It's so gross. Roy Batty, he's also in this scene, the leader of the replicants, and he interrogates James Hong by taking off his coat. In like one of the places where you definitely want to have a coat. I mean,
and like he sticks his hand into, I think it's liquid nitrogen, just to show that he's a robot. He's not really feeling it.
Yeah, I think Jason did the same thing, right? That scene's also a great introduction to Roy, because
yes,
you can clearly see why he's the leader of the replicants. Because he's by far the most charismatic of them.
Yep.
And the most confident. The dude, he just commands your attention.
Yep.
You know. And he also just seems to be enjoying everything he does. You know. He's like trying to make the most out of what little life he has left. You know.
Yeah.
And Roy Batty, we can start talking about him if you want. He's probably my favorite character from this movie.
I think I'd agree.
Cause part of it is definitely Rutger Hauer. His performance, it's great, and I also he's got such an interesting arc and just background, because he is the villain.
But he feels more like the main character in some ways than Deckard does.
Yeah, you completely understand his motivations, because he was put into this horrible situation against his own control. He's not treated equally by society due to the way he was made. So he's kind of like Frankenstein's monster.
In some ways, yeah.
So I guess Tyrell is Dr. Frankenstein. And yet, despite all the horrible shit this dude has been through, he seems to enjoy himself quite a lot, you know.
Yeah. One of my favorite scenes with him, besides obviously the ending, is when he goes to confront Dr. Tyrell, actually.
Oh, yes, yep.
And he's trying to get Tyrell to modify him to have a longer lifespan.
Yes.
And it's this very fast-paced conversation where Batty keeps throwing out, well, haven't you try this, it should work. And he's like, well, we tried that. It developed a virus that would have killed you faster. And then he eventually runs on down through all the list of things and basically comes to the conclusion that there's no way that they can take out this planned obsolescence from these robots. And in response, Batty gives up and then gouges out his eyes.
Yeah, he crushes his eye, which is a very gruesome
It
death
is.
right there. And another thing about that scene is just, it's like the only time in the movie where Roy gets genuinely angry.
Yeah.
Because in this scene, compared to how he is in the rest of the movie, because, I mean, but it's justified. He's basically mad at his creator for failing him.
Yeah.
You know, and just that alone is interesting. You know, just a machine meeting his creator face to face. And of course, what's he going to ask for? He wants more life.
Yeah.
You know, he wants to get more, you know, because he only gets to live for 4 years. And of course, you have those limitations. You're going to want more of them. You know? And one interesting thing about this scene is the exchange between him and Tyrell. He says,
I had in mind something a little more radical. What seems to be the problem?
Death.
Death. Well, I'm afraid that's a little out of my jurisdiction.
I want more life, Father.
the next word there, depending on which version you watch, it's either I want more life, Father, which is the version you saw.
Yeah.
Or it's a line which, honestly, I like the original line more. It's,
I want more life, fucker.
it makes more sense in that context.
It does.
He's angry.
It does.
But I do kind of get why that, like, because there is symbolism behind I want more life, Father, you know, because he is his father. He did make him. But I don't know. I just, like...
Especially when you learn at the end of the movie that his time is coming up, that he essentially just has a few days.
Yeah, that's a really interesting scene right there, I think. Because, again, it's just... And you can... Even though, yeah, he does kill Tyrell in a really brutal way, you definitely understand why. I mean...
Yes.
Because, I mean, he built him. He's the one that gave him those limitations, you know, so he's like... Why didn't you give me more life, fucker? Because when you really think about it, Tyrell's kind of the villain of the movie.
Yeah, he's definitely the most evil character in the movie. Because he's the one creating all these robots with human emotions, human thoughts, and setting them out essentially to be slaves.
Yeah, exactly. And he doesn't hold much remorse for creating the replicants and kind of fucking them over. In that scene, he's trying to, like, get Roy to appreciate, like, oh, you've done all these great things in such a short time. You know, there's that famous line.
The light that burns twice as bright burns half as long. And you have burned so very, very brightly, Roy.
He's, like, praising his accomplishments, but he's not really showing any sympathy for Roy's predicament. He basically just views replicants as, like, commerce. He says that at the beginning of the movie. He's like, commerce. You know,
He even, when he's describing them, he says more human than human is our motto.
Yeah.
And so not only is that really, reducing these androids who, for whatever reason, have human thoughts and emotions, he's also just downplaying humanity in general to that.
That's a
Basically
good
saying,
point.
I can play God, I can build a person who would be better than any other person, essentially.
And even though when he's talking about Rachel too, he just calls her an experiment and nothing more. And there was one line, I can't remember the exact line, but there was like one line where it seemed like he said something that kind of indicated he himself might be a replicant.
Oh, okay. So I
think
I
it was
don't
when he was
remember
talking to Deckard.
Yep, about trying the Voight-Kampff machine, I think. When he volunteers to use Rachel.
Demonstrate it. I want to see it work.
Where's the subject?
I want to see it work on a person. I want to see a negative before I provide you with a positive.
What's that going to prove?
Indulge me.
On you?
Try her.
But it made me think, like, okay, that adds another layer to this. So it's a replicant building other replicants.
That's one of the fun things about the concept of these androids that look and act human. It opens the door for any number of these characters to be a replicant.
Who's human and who isn't? Yeah. I will say this about Tyrell, though. I want that dude's glasses.
The extreme bifocals.
Those glasses are amazing, I'm telling you. Like, my glasses lenses, they're a little bit thick, but they're not anywhere close to as thick as the things he's wearing. Rachel I find interesting, too, because she's a replicant, but she doesn't know that she's a replicant, at least at first.
Yep.
Because basically what they do is they implant memories in the replicants to make them think that they're human.
And so she has the memories of one of Tyrell's nieces.
Yes. But yeah, and then eventually she has to accept over the course of the movie what her true nature is.
Yep, and she is incredibly distraught at the beginning.
Yeah. Which Deckard doesn't seem that sympathetic to at first.
Nope.
What was interesting, like, my original takeaway from this movie was that she was one of the weaker parts of the movie, but after thinking about it, her character arc actually might be the most interesting. Just this idea of, like, you don't know what you really are, you think you're human, but then you realize, oh shit, I'm not, I was made in a factory, I'm a android.
It's also pretty interesting contrast with, the other replicants that we see throughout the movie who have known for a while that they're replicants and they want to fight back against that system, essentially.
And she's more like just subservient to
her
own stuff, which it was making me wonder though, like, what does she do in that pyramid?
It's a great question.
Like, is she just like?
I think she just does like secretary work.
I was gonna guess that. Is she like Tyrell's sex slave or something? I don't know.
I don't think it's that. That'd be weird to give her the memories of your niece if you're gonna do that.
True. Yeah. Oh god. Let's just make Tyrell an even more fucked up character they are. But yeah, what does she do there? Does she just stare at an artificial owl all day?
She has to be some sort of secretary, because she is the one that introduces Deckard to Dr. Tyrell.
Yeah. That is true, yeah. I also just like her introduction, too. Like, the music cue that plays.
Yeah.
It's just great, And the shots of the owl, too. I like owls, so seeing an owl in a movie is always nice. Even if it is a robot owl. But not like the one from Clash of the Titans. So. Also, this is a dumb joke, but I was realizing this movie would be very different if Rachel was Rachel from Friends instead.
See, I want a slightly different cut. I want Blade Runner, but it's Ross instead of Rachel.
Ross instead of Rachel. So Ross is the one that realizes he's not actually.
Yes.
Oh god, that'd be like.
That'll be the plot to Blade Runner 2051.
I want this movie now, yeah. He thinks he's just a paleontologist, but no, he's actually...
He's a replicant designed to do paleontology.
Oh my god, just wait till he tells Joey about this. Another thing we have, the lighting in the movie.
Yep.
It's really good.
Even in the dark scenes, you can actually see what's going on, which is so nice and is not done anymore for whatever reason.
Yeah, because you remember we were doing that podcast on The Batman?
Yeah.
And I was complaining a few times, there were certain scenes that I couldn't see what was going on, and some people would be like, oh, it's in the dark. I'm like, Blade Runner, the entire thing is like in the dark, it's raining, but you can still see what's going on. And that movie came out 40 years ago. I'm sorry, there's no excuse. You can actually see what's going on. There's a huge compliment to the movie. Oh my goodness. Pris, we can talk about her for a little bit. She has a very memorable design.
Yes, she's kind of has that like punk rock almost hair.
I was thinking like, punk rock, like glam rock.
Yeah, glam rock would be better. Yeah.
I feel like David Bowie had to have been a bit of an influence on this movie.
I feel like at least for her design.
And Roy's hair kind of looks like David Bowie's a little bit.
Yeah.
Which I was thinking, we don't talk about this much on the podcast, but the hairstyles in this are fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
And Pris, one thing I like the music that plays when she's introduced. And I also just like the scene of her walking around in the rain.
Yeah, trying to like hide in the garbage away from someone who she thinks is going to get her, basically.
What I like about that moment is because it helps humanize the replicants.
Yes.
And their struggle. Because before this, you kind of just see them as these creepy murderers.
Yeah, this is the first time you see a replicant and actually feel bad for him, because there's like an actual fear there that she's showing.
They have to like hide and live like homeless people, basically.
Yeah.
And they do all this without having any dialogue for most of this scene. It's just...
Yeah.
The music, the lighting, facial expressions, that's all you needed. And the scenes between her and Roy, too, because she's, her placement in the movie, she's, like, in a relationship with Roy.
Yeah.
The replicants, and they fell in love, apparently, which I don't know if that's possible, but this movie raises that question as well.
And so Pris is introduced alongside J.F. Sebastian.
Yeah, he's a weird character.
He's very weird, but I like him.
He sounds like Gomer Pyle, honestly. Like, his voice, like, it sounds so much like Gomer Pyle. But yeah, Sebastian, he has this funny hat. He lives alone in this building with tons of mannequins.
Yeah, that he's all built himself.
And what's interesting is Pris, like, she, like, lies and says she's an orphan to, like, get him to trust her.
And
but
don't
then
forget,
it turns out he's actually more sympathetic to the replicants, because he has this, like, disease.
Where, like, his cells age faster. Don't forget, there's the, there are the two mannequins that come up to him when he comes home. They're like, home again, jiggity jig.
Yeah, it's just... Where does he get all these wonderful toys? Just every character in this could potentially be a main character in something else.
Yes, in their own movie.
Yeah, like, it makes me wonder, like, what it would have been like if Blade Runner was a success and they decided to do spin-offs of it. That'd be interesting seeing, like, a spin-off movie about J.F. Sebastian, you know? Because, like, he's not in the movie that much, and he doesn't say much, and you're just like, who the hell is this guy? Like, just... And also, like, the scenes between Pris and Roy. Because it's just really sad thinking about, like, they don't have much time left to live, so they're making the most of it. Roy is just putting fake eyeballs over his actual eyes and goofing around. I don't know if you remember that part, but
Yeah.
not a lot of humor in the movie, but there's that. So there's two other replicants. There's Zora. I guess we kind of talked about her. She was the stripper with the pet snake.
She's not in it a whole lot.
I definitely remembered her though, because
yes, she has a very memorable death,
and also a nude scene too.
Oh yeah, that's right. She showers.
She's got all these glitter on her and stuff. She's got this fake snake too. Which an interesting thing about that, the artificial snake. One thing that's huge in the book, but it's only briefly mentioned a few times in the movie, is that animals are a commodity in that world.
It's definitely implied in this that they're rare to an extent.
Yeah, because Deckard, he's talking to Zora and asks her if her snake is real, and she says she wouldn't be able to afford one if it was. In the book, actually, they talk about artificial animals a lot and real animals a lot. And in the book, Deckard, actually, his motivation for taking the job is he wants to buy a real animal for his wife with the money he's making from the job. Yeah. Oh, that's another thing. Deckard's married in the book, not in the movie. And then he decides to fuck a robot in this movie. Yeah, the scene where he kills Zora, that's really sad, actually.
Yeah. And it really does feel like he's the bad guy in that scenario. Because she really hasn't done anything to hurt anyone from what we've seen. She's just a stripper trying to basically living day to day. She doesn't have enough money to afford a real snake. I mean, she's not doing super well, and Deckard just kind of shows up and kills her.
But yeah, it's a brutal death too. There's blood and stuff.
And when she runs out, she's essentially in a bikini with a clear plastic raincoat.
Yeah, she's not even wearing that much. Yeah, it's just Jesus Christ.
And so when she gets shot, there's kind of an interesting effect where you see the blood splatter, but since she's in the raincoat, it all just goes on the inside of that raincoat.
And she's smashing through glass too. And again, it's just I love the music and the atmosphere there. And then the other replicant that we're shown in the movie is Leon. And he's interesting. He's the youngest of the replicants, if I remember right. Yeah. And he's also the one with the least grasp over his emotions.
Yeah. I believe he's 2 years old in this one. So he gives his creation date, and it's 2017.
2017, which is when the second movie came out, I should point. But he's keeping all these photographs and stuff. It's that's one thing replicants do in the Blade Runner universe is they like to have photographs just all over the place. It's memories, And that's another thing people use is oh, maybe Deckard's a replicant because he's got tons of photographs around his room. Or he's a detective, and detectives do that sometimes.
Impossible.
There's one weird scene in this movie.
Which one?
Where between Deckard and Rachel, where she tries leaving, and he blocks the door and kisses her. Which I always found that scene weird. Some people, they bring up oh, he's kind of forcing himself on her, which okay, there is that, but I just find it weird also that because there is ambiguity over is he a human or not. Because if he's a human that's trying to fuck a robot. Okay, if he's a replicant trying to fuck another replicant.
Yeah.
It's just weird no matter what way you try to have it come across.
Yeah.
It's apparently it's Ridley Scott's least favorite scene in the movie.
Huh.
He always felt it didn't come across the way he wanted it to.
Yeah.
Because it kind of looks like he's assaulting her, basically.
It is a bit kind of awkward and just sort of there.
And he said he wished the script had more lines for him to work with, but yeah. Oh, another thing is about Sebastian is he does die in this movie, but they don't actually show it.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of weird.
what happened? Well, I was reading a bit about this. Apparently, they were going to shoot his death scene, but they apparently thought the movie was too violent already, so they never got around to it.
Huh.
Like, how does he die? Like,
I don't know if they say, because I think it just comes up in like a news report or something.
I guess we can only speculate. It must have been really fucking graphic then in that case.
Yeah.
Which, why would Roy do that to poor Sebastian? I mean, Sebastian.
I know, he was the nicest guy in the whole movie.
Exactly, yeah, he's like the only person that seems to like sympathize with the replicants, you know, even though they're kind of murderous and crazy. Also another weird scene is when Pris attacks Deckard.
Yeah, she's doing all these weird, like, flips everywhere and is trying to, like, crush his head with her thighs, basically.
Sort of like singing it on a top now that I think about it. And that's where Deckard kills Pris. And I love the encounter between Deckard and Roy. You've just been waiting the whole movie for the two main characters to finally face each other.
And it's fantastic. Deckard is just getting his ass beat the whole time, basically.
Yeah, he gets his fingers broken. Like, Roy, like, breaks his fingers, like, saying, oh, this is for Zora, this is for Pris, you know?
Yeah.
And but also, Roy's he's just so sad, like, his friends died. Especially Pris, because he was in love with her, you know? And yeah, it's just Deckard's just hunting Roy through this building while it's raining really hard. And I also just love how Roy is fucking with him the whole time.
I know, it just kind of reverses eventually, where Deckard is the one who starts to get chased by Roy.
Roy's like another thing is Roy's just going completely insane at this point.
Yeah.
He's like just acting, he's like howling like a madman, and just eventually he just takes all his clothes off. He's just running around in his underwear in the rain. He keeps throwing these like weird rhymes.
And he's like running on all fours at one point.
Right too, yeah. I don't know if it's just his programming is causing him to just go completely insane right before he dies, or like if he's just trying to have fun with like the last moments that he has left. But
yeah.
He puts a nail through his hand. He just seems to just enjoy toying and taunting Deckard the whole time. Like,
he's taking so much joy out of just being this absolute psychotic menace.
Because Deckard's like not putting up much of a fight, like, because he really can't. He's like completely outmatched. He's this just like drunk, depressed, like detective, basically.
Yeah.
And then Roy, he's like this super soldier android. He's just beating the shit out of him the whole time. It's like throwing him through walls and shit. And there's a really interesting thing here where it's Roy that ends up saving Deckard.
Yeah, Deckard slips and he's barely hanging on to the edge of this building in the rain. And even though Roy's been chasing him around, being all crazy the whole time, he ends up helping him up onto the roof safely.
Or usually you'd think it'd be like the other way around.
Yeah.
Which that's another thing in the movie that makes you go, like, maybe like Roy is like the protagonist in the movie instead of Deckard.
And then we get the rather short monologue from Roy at the end that's sort of there to basically spell everything out at the very end.
It's the Tears and Rain speech. This might be my favorite monologue in film history. I'm not even kidding. It might actually be my favorite. Like, it's great. Like, basically it's him, like, right before he dies, he's recounting some of the memories that he has and saying,
all those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
that he has and saying they'll be lost in time like tears in rain, which explains why there's so much rain in this movie.
Yeah.
And then he just dies. And Deckard's just kind of sitting there the whole time, just watching him, just...
And he's just sort of left there to take it all in.
Yeah. And to me, I always saw it as Roy saying to Deckard that he needs to appreciate his life more.
Yeah.
Especially since he gets way more years to live. It's beautifully acted too, like Rutger Hauer's like performance right there. And also the lighting, like the way it's shot, it's like one of those scenes, like just, it's perfect. It generally, if people remember like at least one thing from this movie, they usually remember this scene.
Yeah.
If anything, you know. And the other thing is, like, I think my two favorite deaths in movie history are probably this and 2001: A Space Odyssey, and both aren't even humans dying.
Both cases there. Well, I guess in this one it's an android, but the other one's an AI, yeah.
And but they're like two of the saddest death scenes in movie history, and they weren't even humans. I'm sorry, I still miss Hal. Hal was just doing what his programming told him to. Yeah, I mean, that's one of those scenes, like, people have discussed it, like,
yeah,
so much. I mean, what else can you really add to it, you know? And when Rutger Hauer actually did die a few years ago, obviously I thought of that, you know?
I remember seeing on Twitter a lot of people posting this when he died.
Yeah. And he actually died in 2019, too. Which,
oh, wow.
Which is the year the movie takes place in, yeah. And yeah, after all this, Deckard, he's just laying there in the rain. Poor guy, just soaking it all in.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Trying to get over the fact that this psycho just tried to murder him, waxed poetic, and died on the spot.
He does wax poetic a lot in the movie, not just to Deckard, but to other people. I think he quotes like William Blake at one point. But yeah, and then Gaff shows up. we haven't had enough of that, and then so-and-so shows up, and then Gaff shows up. I guess he's just been following Deckard the whole time. Like, what was he thinking while he was watching that whole thing? Like, just this crazy robot trying to kill him, and then he just gives a speech.
And then he's like, I'm not going to try and help Deckard at all. He can fight the robot that's naked, running around on all fours in the middle of the rain.
Yeah.
Gentlemen's job, sir. I guess you're through, huh?
Finished.
And I just like how bleak the ending to this movie is. Because Deckard, he like goes back to the apartment. His apartment. He finds Rachel and wakes her up, basically saying, you know, they gotta leave. And get out of there. He's quitting his Blade Runner job, which, I mean...
That's probably the right choice.
Yeah. He should probably get those fingers looked at, you know, at a hospital before he...
Gotta get him set properly while he still has his medical insurance.
And yeah, while he's leaving, he sees the origami unicorn that Gaff left there. He hears him saying, you know...
Too bad she won't live. But then again, who does?
Which that really... makes me wonder, because Rachel, she's also a replicant. She doesn't have much time left, does she? And people are probably going to be hunting after him, too.
Yep.
So what the fuck is going to happen? And that's just the end. They leave the apartment, and then credits.
It is a very dour ending.
Yeah, but I mean, that's... the movie. You know,
yeah.
That's Blade Runner. You know, Blade Runner is a very dour movie. Final thoughts.
it can be a little bit slow, especially at the beginning, but it's still fantastic. It's shot beautifully. It has very memorable characters and performances. The music is excellent. The whole design of Los Angeles is just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty perfect like sci-fi movie.
Yeah, and it leaves a lot for you to talk about. Like we mentioned, like who is and isn't a replicant is a great example, but then also just the various themes throughout the movie.
There's so many ideas going on here, yeah. And I think that's because I actually think this is my favorite Ridley Scott movie, believe it or not.
I could see it.
Because it's the only competition it has is Alien.
Yeah.
That's the only competition it has. And Alien, because I was thinking about it, I was trying to decide. And Alien is great, obviously. But I think I just like the world and the ideas here more. They are both sci-fi movies, but this one definitely has more sci-fi elements in it than Alien, which is more horror.
Yeah. And yeah, with Alien, you don't really get much of a sense of what the universe is like that it takes place in. Because it all takes place on the ship and then briefly on the alien planet.
Alien does have a huge advantage, though, having the xenomorph in it.
Yes.
One of the most iconic movie monsters, villains, like, of all time. I think I just like Blade Runner a little bit more, because the whole concept of an android's relation to humans, it's explored more here than in Alien, and that's just something I've always liked about sci-fi movies, is like humans' relationship to technology and stuff. And Blade Runner it's a more unique movie to me. Because Alien, when you really think about it, it is just, as Roger Ebert described it, it's a haunted house movie in space.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. And I think it's a more personal movie to me. Like, everything about the look and atmosphere of Blade Runner is appealing to me.
Yeah.
Also, I think it does a great job at depicting loneliness. And I just find the contrast between Deckard and the replicants in this really interesting. Because Deckard, he's more self-loathing and kind of takes life for granted, at least at first. And then after his encounter with Roy, who was in a much worse situation than him.
Yeah.
But he was living life to the fullest, right to the very end. And it's only after, like, that speech that Deckard, he finally begins to appreciate his life. He's like, I need to get out of here. I'm gonna bang this android. I'll just drive off somewhere else. It's one of those movies that, I mean, it kind of just goes without saying. It's great visuals. The cast is great. The score is great. The directing's great. There's just lots of great ideas in the movie too. Like,
yeah.
I mean, the music itself perfectly sums up the feel of the movie. It's futuristic, but also very melancholy.
Yes.
I don't know if have I said this. It's one of my favorite movie scores of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just,
and it is well deserved.
Which is weird because I usually like more orchestral movie scores, but this score fits the movie perfectly. It's one of the, because a lot of synthesizer scores from the 80s sound really dated now. But this one here, like, I don't know if it's just the sound design or something, but it just sounds so good, even like 40 years later. Part of it might also, there are a few instruments in there besides synthesizer. Like, there's a saxophone in there as well, and piano a few times. And it's a movie, it's able to explore these interesting ideas of, like, what it means to be human and what it means to be a machine without coming across as pretentious,
like Prometheus or Covenant.
Yeah, some certain other Ridley Scott movies we've done on the podcast. At some point, I want to see this movie in the theater.
Oh yeah, no, this is definitely one that you need to see on the big screen.
Along with the original Star Wars movies and 2001: A Space Odyssey, it's one of those like older movies that I really want to get the full theatrical experience of this movie.
Yeah.
Especially 2001. That's a movie that like deserves to be seen on a big screen. Like,
Man, The Shining would be great on a big screen.
oh, that too. Yeah, really, any Stanley Kubrick movie, really. Most Ridley Scott movies, most of them. There's a lot of Spielberg movies, you know, like the Indiana Jones movies. Those would be fun to see in the theater. And again, lots of movies have tried ripping off Blade Runner, but they were really only able to rip off the aesthetic of Blade Runner. They were never able to copy like the feel and the atmosphere of this movie. This is another movie where it's like, where do you start? Where do you end with it? I'm very relieved that you really liked it. You didn't just like, you said you loved it. That made me really.
Yeah, no, I really got absorbed into this world. So
it's probably the best like world we've like seen in a movie on this podcast since like Escape from New York. That also had a really immersive like,
yeah, a very fleshed out world, it felt like.
Although I honestly I prefer Blade Runner to Escape from New York just a little bit. They're very different movies. That's the thing, but I think I do give the edge to Blade Runner. I think it has a better villain than Escape from New York. Roy Batty is pretty hard to beat.
Yeah.
As far as sci-fi villains, unless you're HAL 9000 or Darth Vader, it's a little hard to get better than Roy Batty. Like, that's how you do a villain, you know, where they do terrible things, but they're also, you understand why they are the way they are. Because like we mentioned before, he's almost the hero in the movie. Deckard's not very likable.
Nope.
Deckard's kind of an asshole. He's just killing all these
especially
robots.
like we mentioned with Zora, like, you feel really bad for Zora.
Like, really, he only becomes a good guy, like, towards the very end of the movie. Like, during most of it, he's like, that's kind of a cool bait and switch right there, I think. It's like, you think he's gonna be you kind of think he's gonna be the hero, but no, the fucking robots end up being a little bit more likable than him.
Yeah.
Like, he's not an evil dude, he's just doing his job, even if he doesn't like his job, but it's just a terrible job.
So, do you want me to start off with some video game related trivia for Blade Runner?
Okay, let's go with that.
So, there were actually 2 video game adaptations made of Blade Runner. Both of them are pretty interesting for different reasons. So,
what consoles were they done for?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the one that was produced first. So, the first one came out in 1985, so about 3 years after the film. And this one was weird. So it came out for the Commodore 64. So you already know we're off to a great start with that.
The Commodore 64.
The ZX Spectrum, the Amstrad CPC. So
I was trying to imagine like an Atari version of Blade Runner. I'm
gonna post this video so you can see what this game looks like.
I'm gonna guess before I look at it. I'm gonna guess. Is it like one of those like click and search games or something where like Deckard's
No, not entirely. What's most fascinating about this game is that it's technically not based on the movie Blade Runner.
Oh, is it based on the book?
No.
Wait, what?
They were unable to get the license for Blade Runner. Like the official license for the movie. But somehow they were able to get the license for the score to the movie. And so the game is based on an interpretation of the film score.
I'm already noticing, because he's just running around shooting people on the streets.
So the whole plot is
Terminator. That's more like the Terminator than like...
So the whole plot is you're playing as essentially a Blade Runner hunting down replica droids.
Oh,
which
is this
they
what
call
Holden was
replicants.
doing then? Maybe.
Yes.
Oh, that's funny. That's a funny way to think about it.
Needless to say, this game was not received very well.
I wonder why.
Now, the other one is also interesting, but for very different reasons.
Is it more of like, does he do more of the detective stuff in this
Yes.
game? Or okay.
So this was released 15 years after the movie. And it is one of those point-and-click adventure games where you're going around doing a lot of detective work. And the basic plot of the game is
what console is this one for?
Oh, yeah. So it came out on PC first, where it stayed for a while. But recently, a couple years after 2049 came out, they re-released this game on modern consoles like PS4, Xbox, Switch. So the basic plot to the game is that there is a murder of a man who collected rare and exotic animals. And so you play as a character named Ray McCoy, who is a Blade Runner attempting to hunt down a replicant who he thinks is responsible for the crime. And what's very interesting about this is there is a pretty large amount of randomization. So every time you play, there are plot details that are different. So on your first playthrough, like this character, like a certain character might be a replicant. On another playthrough, they may not be. And there's a chance that they could be a replicant and they don't know about it. You could get characters who on one playthrough are very friendly towards you and want to help you, and on other playthroughs hate you and don't want anything to do with you.
So it's sort of choose your own adventure a little bit.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
It's choose your own adventure, but you don't get to choose it.
And so, but there actually is a pretty big element of choice. There are 13 endings to the game that you can get depending on how the investigation goes, who you talk to, who you meet, and how they act towards you, and who's a replicant and all that. But there's sort of three major threads that the rest of the endings split off of.
Let's see.
So
Miss Scarlet kills Mr. Body in one of them. Mr. Green is FBI. Oh, wait a minute, wrong thing.
So there's the possibility that the character you're playing as is human, and you continue your job hunting down replicants. There's the possibility that you are a replicant and that you leave and join the replicants. And there's also the possibility that it's left ambiguous, kind of like the movie, and you sort of leave the Blade Runner life behind.
This sounds like a complicated game.
Yes. To make things even more complicated,
to be fair, though, that's more what I would expect a Blade Runner game to be like.
And it's very interesting. And on top of that, the game takes place at about the same time as the movie does. And so there will be some points during the main game where the plot crosses over with the movie in a few spots.
No. Is it like fucking Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, where you like see parts of the movie? Oh my god.
I'm not sure. I haven't really gotten very far in it yet, but I have read that it does cross over.
It's like Lion King 1.5. You see it from Timon and Pumbaa's perspective.
But the original version got a lot of praise. It was pretty highly regarded, and a lot of people nowadays especially love the original version of the game. The re-release had some problems where the graphics didn't look quite as good. There was like subtitle issues, but
I assume you haven't played the Commodore 64 one.
No. So here is an example of one person's playthrough of the game.
I'm looking at like pictures of it. It definitely looks very Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Like the design, they got the design right.
And to date, those are the only two Blade Runner video games that have ever been made.
I mean, the movie did bomb, so
yeah. But but that's an interesting time to do it 15 years after the movie came out, to just be like, sure, here's a game based on it.
Yeah, 1997. That was like 5 years after the director's cut. came out. Maybe it was like people were noticing it just had some popularity at that point, so they're like, let's try to cash in on that. It's not just run and shoot like the other one was.
No.
Basically, it's like, oh, you have to actually look.
Yeah, you have to actually think about it a little bit.
Which is fitting for that. It's weird that it's not Deckard, though.
Yeah, that is a little strange, but it did leave the game open to have a bit more choice and to be a bit more unique, in my opinion.
Maybe they based Ryan Gosling's character in the next movie off of this guy a little bit.
That'd be interesting.
So, apparently some of the original actors are in this, too.
Yes, I believe James Hong and Sean Young both appear.
Sean Young, Brian James, he played Leon. James Hong, Joe Turkel, so Tyrell is in it, apparently.
They did not get Harrison Ford for it, unfortunately.
Yeah, Harrison Ford doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would, like, sit down and...
Yeah, do a lot of voice work.
For, video game, because he already did voiceover work for Blade Runner. Well, I'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, so...
Alright, but yeah, that's all I had on the games.
I don't know how to segue into this. Back to the actual movie. Blade Runner was made into a video game, but before that, it was a movie. And the original reviews for it were mixed. Roger Ebert was initially not a huge fan of the movie.
Really?
He gave the theatrical version a thumbs down. To be fair, it was the theatrical version. However, he gave the director's cut 3 stars, praising the visuals but criticizing the characters. He gave the final cut 4 stars and added it to his great movies list.
Wow.
So I guess over time, it just, when there were different cuts of it, he just kind of grew to like it. His colleague, Gene Siskel, however, never warmed up to it.
Really?
Yeah, but then again, Gene Siskel, he didn't like The Terminator, he didn't like Aliens. Surprisingly, he liked John Carpenter's The Thing. That, I would not have guessed.
That's the one that surprised me, yeah.
I was surprised he liked that one. Roger Ebert gave that one a thumbs down. He also didn't like Predator. Which we could go on all day about what did Roger Ebert like and not like. What did Gene Siskel like and not like. Gene Siskel liked your favorite movie we've done on the podcast. I don't have to say what it is, do I?
What about the other man who liked my favorite movie on the podcast? What did he give this?
Leonard Maltin. He was not impressed with Blade Runner.
Sounds like a 2 out of 4.
I should have asked you to guess, but that's higher than what he gave it actually.
Oh no.
I didn't actually write down what his review was, because I was like, I mean, you gave Blade Runner 1.5 out of 4 stars. Ooh. I mean, I just don't even know how to respond to that.
Did he ever reevaluate it after, like, the director, the final cuts came out?
I think he did, and he said he still didn't like it. But yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, I'm not even going to read his review. Like, he gave it 1.5 out of 4 stars, and we'll just leave it at that. You might remember, that's the same rating he gave First Blood.
Oh, that's right.
A little bit lower than what he gave Taxi Driver and The Shining and The Dark Knight, among others.
But Batman Forever, that is peak cinema.
Peak Batman cinema, at least for him. I can't believe that 1.5 out of 4 stars. Oh my jeez. He's probably like, it's too dark. It's too depressing. Oh, fucking hell. Okay. Writer Philip K. Dick was worried about how his book would translate to the screen. he refused to do a novelization of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Fair.
Although apparently he did see the visuals, like on TV. He said it was exactly what he imagined the world would look like.
Wow.
Although unfortunately he never got to see the finished product because he died 3 months before the movie was released.
Oh, really?
Rest in peace. Yeah, and like that was the first adaptation of his works too.
Wow.
So he never got to see any of the film adaptation. That what he would have thought of it, who knows? Now there have been several different cuts of this movie. The DVD I have has 4 versions of it, and they're all the same length, which is
Oh, wow.
1 hour and 57 minutes. And what's funny is that the making of documentary is longer than the movie. Dangerous Days, Making Blade Runner, is 3 hours
Oh, that's long.
and 34
Oh.
minutes.
Oh, that's long.
I haven't watched the whole making. I'll be totally honest. I haven't watched like the making of in its entirety, but I've watched like clips of it. I tried to get a gist of it. But the different cuts of it. So the theatrical cut, basically the one most people saw, was infamous because it featured Harrison Ford narrating what was going on.
Oh.
Because during test screenings, they thought audiences wouldn't be able to tell what was going on.
That's weird.
And what's weird is actually that was Ridley Scott's idea.
Really?
Like, most people think the producers forced him to do that, but apparently it was his idea because he didn't want people to be confused. Ford did not like the narration. And some claim that he deliberately gave it a bad reading, hoping that they wouldn't use it. Either way, it apparently really soured his experience making the movie. And it's pretty bad narration. Harrison Ford, he just sounds bored, and it basically spoon feeds like information to the audience. But really, this is a movie. It's just better off not doing that. It's one of those movies that it just things should be left a little more ambiguous. We don't need like, I wonder what he was thinking in those last moments before he died or something like.
You know, I just looked up a clip and it was him going skin jobs. That's what people call replicants that they don't like.
He says the N-word, yeah. He says the N-word in the original narration, which, I guess that's one reason to watch the original cut of Blade Runner, is if you want to hear Harrison Ford say the N-word, then there you go. But it really fucks up the atmosphere of the movie. Because there's also parts of the movie where he's talking over the Vangelis score, and I'm like, oh god damn it, it's just... I guess it does add to Deckard's character in that it makes him feel like a burnt-out police officer.
And I will say that it does kind of add to that noir feel, having the detective narrate over it, but at the end of the day, it doesn't feel all that necessary.
And they're just not well delivered either. It's just like, some of it is also just, oh, here's me explaining the previous scene.
Nah.
Like, it's just... It treats the audience like they're morons. Another huge difference, it had a different ending.
Okay.
And the different end, it actually uses unused aerial footage from the opening of The Shining.
Really?
And Ridley Scott had to get permission from Stanley Kubrick to use the footage. And basically, the original ending, the movie ends with Deckard and Rachel flying off to some place with trees and mountains. That, like, it just doesn't fit at all. with the look of the rest of the movie. And then he also explains in narration that Gaff was wrong about Rachel, and she has a longer lifespan than other replicants.
Well, isn't that convenient?
Because apparently Tyrell told him off screen that Rachel was special.
Well, isn't that convenient?
It's bad. It kills the ambiguity of the ending, and it does not fit with the tone of the rest of the movie. It was basically just added because the studio wanted a happier ending. Although one thing that is funny, though, is actually the first version of Blade Runner I saw was the theatrical version.
Okay.
Because I wanted to, like, get an idea of what it was like when it was originally released. So that's why, I didn't really fully understand, like, why are there so many different cuts of this movie? It doesn't make sense to me. But then after reading a little more, I'm like, oh, okay, I can kind of... and also because I was, like, thinking maybe the narration will help me understand the movie a little more. Because to be fair, when you first see it, there are things that kind of go over your head a little bit, And then there's the international cut, and it's basically the same as the US theatrical version, except it has more violence.
Okay.
Because the theatrical version did not have the graphic eye gouging. It just cuts to Roy's face, and you just hear it. You don't actually see it.
And so that one just put it back in, then.
And also the part where Roy puts a nail in his hand. This is also the only cut of the movie I've not watched yet. Because it's basically the same as the other fucking version, except, you get...
more violence.
Although, who knows, maybe I will get around to it at some point. I have them all on DVD, might as well. The director's cut from 1992, which is weird that it's called the director's cut, because technically Ridley Scott did not work on the editing of this cut.
Huh.
But it did get his approval. So technically the final cut is the real director's cut. But yeah, so the director's cut, it added in the famous unicorn dream.
Okay.
And the unicorn dream was actually unused footage from Ridley Scott's fantasy film Legend.
Huh. They really like just using random unused footage from other movies, huh?
We should do that movie on the podcast at some point. That might be interesting. That's another movie where I've heard the director's cut is a lot better than the theatrical. I've heard that about most Ridley Scott movies, honestly. Like, a lot of people, they consider the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven a lot better than the theatrical version, but I've only seen the theatrical version, For some reason, I want to see what it was like when it first came out. That's always my, preferred way of watching it, usually. That just makes the most sense to me. For some reason. And then sometimes, maybe I will watch the director's cut, because sometimes it does improve the movie, and sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it changes the aspect ratio to 4:3 and lasts 4 hours.
I was thinking, where is this going? And I'm like, okay, I remember now. I haven't seen the director's cut of Watchmen, but, I haven't seen the director's cut of any Zack Snyder movie, because I don't give a fuck.
I watched the Batman v Superman director's cut, but we already talked about that.
We did, yes. With the disturbing bathtubs. The director's cut also removed the voiceover and the happy ending, the studio enforced ending. So, and it was this version that kind of started Blade Runner's critical reappraisal, because it's so much better. I mean, it's so much better without the alternate ending and without the voiceover. Although Ridley Scott still wasn't satisfied, because again, he wasn't given complete control over that cut. So he made the final cut, and that's his preferred version of the movie.
Okay.
And that's the version you watched, and I have seen it. I have seen it. It's mostly similar to the director's cut, but it does make a lot of small changes, mostly like fixing mistakes and stuff.
Okay.
Like there's like continuity errors. Like there's like what the shot of the dove flying away. Originally, it was like a blue sky because they didn't have enough time to finish filming it, so they fixed that in the final cut. And also, Zora, like when she gets killed, they had this stunt double with like a wig that didn't look like her, you know, and you can see shots of her face. So they like filmed footage of her and like digitally added it back into the movie.
Okay.
And it's actually, you don't really notice it either. So
yeah.
And another thing, the director's cut was missing the extra violence from the international cut, so the final cut added it back in.
Okay, so it's sort of like a blend of directors and the international.
So you get to see the eye gouging scene in all its bloody glory.
Oh no, the final cut debuted on Sci-Fi.
Oh really?
Yeah, the home of the Asylum channels.
There aren't really any huge changes to the special effects. This isn't the Star Wars special editions. Like, if there is any CGI, it's pretty well integrated in the movie. You just don't notice it. Although some of the color grading was changed in this version. As far as picture and sound quality go, though, this is by far the best version. Like, it looks amazing. You were watching it on a computer, right?
Yeah.
But, like, it looks really, like, they did it.
It does.
It's like a 40-year-old movie. They've done such a great job of, like, restoring it, making sure it looks and sounds as good as possible. The one change I don't really like, though, is when they changed Roy Batty's line, which I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
It was originally, "I want more life. Fucker."
Fucker.
To, "I want more life. Father." And there's also a work print version, but the DVD I have doesn't have that version of it.
Was that ever released?
It has been released. There are
That's
some
weird.
I think there are some Blu-ray versions that have it, and like laser discs and stuff. And I think the opening crawl was a little bit different, but like, and some of the music was a little bit different, but it's about the same. It doesn't have the voiceover either, so it's about the same as the director's cut with like a few things. It's a work print, so it's gonna be a little. Mm-hmm. I haven't actually watched it, so I can't really. And again, this isn't even counting like preview cuts of the movie, TV edited versions. But I'm trying to think of a movie that has this many different cuts of it.
Apocalypse Now had 3 cuts.
This has 5 officially released cuts of the same movie.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Also, another thing, George Lucas could really learn a lesson from Ridley Scott here. Ridley Scott, he's willing to re-release every cut of Blade Runner so anybody can see them, anybody can choose like which one they prefer. The only versions of the original Star Wars movies that get re-released are the special editions. That and Ridley Scott's changes actually improved the movie. So, well, except for I still prefer the "I want more life, fucker" line. I prefer that, but most of the other changes actually did improve the movie. When Ridley Scott first met Harrison Ford to talk about Blade Runner, he had just come from the set of Raiders of the Lost Ark and was still wearing the Indiana Jones costume. Can you think of a better way to meet Harrison Ford? I mean,
than in full Indiana Jones regalia.
Yeah. Oh, the snake scene. Oh, I bet. Oh, if Indy was in Blade Runner, he would not have liked that artificial snake. Rutger Hauer, I mentioned earlier, he died in 2019, the same year this movie takes place. Rest in peace. This was his favorite movie of the movies he appeared in.
Okay.
And he actually, the Tears and Rain monologue, that's actually not what was in the original script. That's actually what happened is before they filmed it, Rutger Hauer revised it. He shortened it a bit and changed some of the phrasing, and that's the version that appears in the movie.
Okay.
Which maybe that's why it works so well, is because it's his own words too that he's saying. That's pretty cool. Blondie lead singer Debbie Harry was considered for the role of Pris.
She does kind of look a bit like Prim. Pris.
Pris, yeah.
I'm losing the ability to speak.
Wait, are you a replicant?
Yes, you've caught me. I have 2 days left.
Oh no. Fuck, we're gonna have to... Before those 2 days are up, watch Blade Runner 2049 at least.
We gotta squeeze as much content as we can out of my 2 days of life.
Other actors who were considered to play Deckard included Robert Mitchum, which definitely works if you're going for the noir vibe. He's also older than Harrison Ford, so he would have seemed yeah, he looks like a guy who's probably gonna retire soon. So, Dustin Hoffman.
Okay, that would have been weird.
Based on his performance in Midnight Cowboy, I would think he'd be more playing J.F. Sebastian or something, but hell, that would have been a perfect casting choice right there. Dustin Hoffman as Sebastian. But as Deckard, that's weird.
Yeah, no, I can't see him as Deckard.
Not really. Gene Hackman. That seems almost tailor written for Gene Hackman, honestly.
Yeah.
Hell, he could have played Roy as well. Oh, interesting. Sean Connery.
Oh. Huh.
I mean, it's basically you're either going to get Indiana Jones or his dad. I mean, oh, good Lord, yes. Jack Nicholson.
Oh.
I could see him as Gaff.
I could see him as Roy.
Or Roy, yeah. He could be Roy or Gaff.
I could see him as Tyrell, too, actually.
Listen, Sparky, here's the deal.
I could see him as most characters except for Deckard.
He would give Deckard a harder edge, I think. Deckard would be a little more unstable.
Yeah.
In this version. If he was doing his performance from Chinatown, but in this setting, that actually would be perfect, now that I think about it. That's also a film noir type movie, where he's kind of a burnt out cop, so... Paul Newman. The problem with Paul Newman, though, is, whenever I see him in a movie, if he's playing, the few times I've seen him play, more of an anti-hero or more of a villain, I'm like, God damn it, he's too likable and too cool to be playing this type of character. So, I don't know. Maybe that's my personal bias. Oh, this makes total sense. Clint Eastwood.
Oh, yeah. I could see that one.
Yeah, I mean, Deckard almost feels like a Clint Eastwood character already. Yeah. Although the problem with that, though, is I have a hard time believing that the androids would be able to beat up Clint Eastwood. He'd also be going on like these monologues about his gun right before shooting this reference. Tommy Lee Jones.
I could kind of see that.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That would have been a different movie. That would have been a very different movie.
You could have retitled the movie The Blade Runner, man.
I feel like it would feel a lot like Total Recall if they would have gone down that route.
Yeah, which is also based on Philip K. Dick's story. Yeah, it probably would have just been the... If you put him just into this movie as is, it doesn't really fit. You'd have to, like, change it. If you're going to change the script a bit, it had to be more of an action movie, obviously.
Yeah.
Oh, and it'd be a reverse Terminator too, because instead of being a machine that hunts after people, it's
a man hunting machines.
Exactly, yeah. Peter Falk, he was also considered. Basically, just be Columbo in a futuristic setting. Nick Nolte, which that I could see.
Yeah.
Al Pacino.
Huh. I could see that.
It'd be Serpico, but in, like, the future, is what I'm imagining. And Burt Reynolds. Okay, out of this list, the ones that I think are least fitting are Dustin Hoffman, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Burt Reynolds.
Burt Reynolds would have made this a very, very different movie.
I'd love to see this, but if it was directed by Hal Needham and starred Burt Reynolds, it'd basically be just Smokey and the Bandit and Cannonball Run, but in a futuristic setting. It's Cannonball Run, but with flying cars. It's Smokey and the Bandit with flying cars and robots. This movie came out the same day as John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh, that's a busy day.
Which, that's another movie that was a box office bomb and wasn't appreciated until years later. Like, some people blame the release of E.T. on these two movies bombing, as audiences weren't in the mood for more depressing movies during the summer, which... maybe. We get opening credits against a black screen. Apparently Ridley Scott chose to do that because he didn't want the credits to upstage the visuals.
Fair.
Which I think was a good choice. It also makes the reveal of the landscape all that more memorable.
Yeah.
And I also just like the opening credits too, like where it's just, you hear that thumping sound in the background and then the music playing. It's like kind of building up. It's very well executed, I think. Okay. Yeah, that's all I got for trivia. We're not going 8.
I think with that, it'd be time to roll the Andy Griffith.
Blade Runner. It's a great movie. Stick to the final cut and the director's cut, though. Don't.
Yeah.
Maybe out of curiosity, check out the theatrical versions, but definitely don't show that to somebody for the if they want to see it the first time. It's a great movie. Definitely watch it. And if you have seen it, watch it again, because why the fuck not?
Buy it on Laserdisc.
Buy it on Laserdisc.
Good night, you stupid idiot. Good night, you miserable slob.